What happened with Robin Williams, MC saying?
Oh God, what Robin Williams was so brilliant, and to say that he died by hanging himself on a door frame, it just doesn't. I don't buy it. But I mean, look at John Belushi. He was getting really activist before his death, and it was believed that he was given some kind of hot shot. But and he was good friends with Robin Williams in the younger days, in Robin Williams' younger, real young days, or I believe. But it's just a lot of that stuff going on in entertainment. Um, Now, Alex Constantine, I see someone wrote about Michael Hutchence, is putting Michael Hutchence up there. Alex Constantine wrote a chapter about Michael Hutchence, and me and Alex Constantine were doing the same kind of research at the same time. He got his book out a little faster than me, but I respect his work, and I believe he respects mine. I mentioned some of his work in mine. I go a little different angle than he does, but we really overlap a lot. He has a whole chapter on Michael Hutchence. I don't know if can't say it's the strongest chapter in his book, but it's pretty interesting.
JFK, that's a big one. I think we
Well,
all know that. I think we all know who did that one.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty obvious. I mean, the documentation's huge on JFK. There's so many books. I didn't even want to get into JFK that much because there's so many books out there already. That's why I got into RFK and described all about RFK, Robert F. Kennedy. So JFK though was he had fired the head of MK. He had fired the head of the CIA. First in 1960, he did away with MK Ultra. He said that's project cannot keep going, and they did it behind his back. They ran it behind his back. And after his assassination, they changed the name to MK Search. And he was he was trying to stop, the Vietnam War. He was bringing troops home. I have evidence and have him giving talks in my film about that. And he was just doing so much for peace, talking to Khrushchev through letters directly, Khrushchev being the head of Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, talking to him directly to try to get around their hawks to try to get peace between the Soviet Union and the United States. And he was doing so many other positive things and against the CIA's agenda. CIA is basically an extension of the oligarchs, pro-war racist agenda. And JFK was doing just so many anti-racist and anti-war things at that time that they really just had to do away with him. And it's very sad because him and the Kennedys were the only great mainstream force in our country in terms of reaching those heights of politics to try to push for good things in our country. And they were all targeted, I believe, and their offspring were targeted. JFK Jr. was also targeted because he was thought to be going to be a leading candidate for president. He was already putting out exploratory community when he died mysteriously.
Yeah, we've interviewed a lot of people who were in prison with Saran, and they've given us some good information. What happened with John Lennon then?
Yeah, so I mean Lennon, John Lennon was just a great creative force and a great person, and they sadly targeted him with drugs early on. But as I said, it was just a couple months probably after Robert Lashbrook came to London with tons of and Lashbrook was assistant director of the CIA's MK Ultra program, and he comes to London with tons of acid and agents and says put in LSD in as many musicians' hands as possible. And here comes this dentist of George Harrison and doses John Lennon's drink without him knowing, his coffee. And John Lennon was furious about that. But then some musicians in the United States convinced him a certain amount of months later that, oh no, LSD is fine and you should try it again and all, and just somehow convinced him to do it. With between this musician, it was David Crosby, who came from the Van Cortlandt family, which was one of the wealthiest. The Van Cortlandt Expressway is a major highway in New York City, and the Van Cortlandt Park is I think it's a 2,000-acre park in New York City. So this is one of the wealthiest families in the country, the Van Cortlandt family. So that's where David Crosby came out of with his family, also in military intelligence. And so he was a CIA asset for sure, like a number of musicians who became instantly popular. And I talk about that in my film, CIA Drugs Are Us, and just convinced John Lennon to trip again. And so here they were messing with his brain and, making him not quite as competent as he could have been, because he was a brilliant guy, brilliant musician, brilliant songwriter, of course. He was anti-war, said it, outright. He was anti-racism. And so the CIA and Tavistock Institute in England were targeting him, and then they get this woman from an aristocratic family, Yoko Ono. She enters his life and obviously never leaves his side. So she's trying to control him every second. I mean, you can see that in the film. She's with him all the time, and convinces him to take. He had given up acid for a year or two, thinking he was losing his mind, and she convinces him that it's fine to take acid again. And is like a publicist of his does the same thing. And I show the evidence that the publicist was intelligence. And then she, according to the journalist who was friends with both of them, who just came out with a memoir in the last maybe 6 years, she introduced John to heroin. I'm sorry, to Brown. And so that's what, how she controlled him. And that's like, and just before his death, he came out and with 2 albums, popular albums, and got into activism. Was going to lead held a press conference, sent out a press release that he was going to sing for an anti-war march a pro-union march in California, and so they got this CIA asset, this guy they were cultivating, Mark David Chapman, to give him loads of drugs. They appeared to brainwash this guy, according to a top journalist in England, Fenton Bressler, who was both a lawyer and a journalist for a daily newspaper. And he says that Chapman was clearly brainwashed, or used hypnosis and drugs and abuse to turn him into a CIA asset. But they also had a CIA operative, Jose Perdomo, who was the doorman at the Dakota, John Lennon's apartment that night, who was the backup shooter to finish the job in case it wasn't successful. And so that's how they did in John Lennon, sadly.
Susan's asking, was Yoko an asset?
Yeah, that's what that's what the evidence seems to support. Yeah, from her actions and her background and all, that's what it appears. But you can't say 100% for sure, but that's what it appears. Yeah.
Hendrix.
So Hendrix, he couldn't because of racism in the United States. He had a hard time making it big in the United States. So he went over to England, where it was a little bit less racist, and he made it big instantly. He had tons of shows, and the top Eric Clapton and George Harrison and everyone else was, Brian Jones was saying how incredible Jimi Hendrix was over there. He got instant shows all across the country, so he couldn't handle the instant fame. And so this Mike Jeffries wormed his way into his life and got him, just says, I can handle all these shows for you, and I can handle all your affairs. And Mike Jeffries admitted he was former MI6, which is the British CIA, and for the American listeners. And so Mike Jeffries proceeded to really manipulate Hendrix and try to get him doing drugs and keep doing drugs. And when Hendrix tried to sober up and tried to fire Mike Jeffries, within 48 hours of actually firing Mike Jeffries, Hendrix dies. And it's similar to how when it was within about 48 hours or so, or maybe 72 hours or so of Tupac Shakur firing Dave Kenner as his lawyer, under Death Row Records. Tupac died, and same thing happened with Jimi Hendrix and Mike Jeffries. And Mike Jeffries, there's 2 people that when Mike Jeffries was drunk, Mike Jeffries admitted having Hendrix killed. Now, who could? I use different reasons, but who could get like a murder team together within 48 hours except someone who's still working for intelligence, and that's Mike Jeffries. Obviously, all the evidence was he was continued working for intelligence, and he tried to get Jimi Hendrix to stop doing anti-war benefits, to stop speaking on behalf of the black, promoting the Black Panthers, and and to stop any kind of activism, and dosed him and got him planted, white on him in an airport to get him arrested, and Jimi Hendrix told his wife, his fiancee, Monica Dannemann, some of these things, and Monica Dannemann wrote about this in her book, her memoir, and she died within a year of coming out with that memoir. So